We'll be starting very soon. Let's get started. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Um, I'm William, your friendly neighborhood counselor, and today we're going to have a brief conversation about ADHD and how it's often misdiagnosed amongst women. Um, if for those of you that don't know, weekly on Mondays and Thursdays, we typically have a topic dealing with the awareness of the month. And this is a special one because we missed our last Thursday one. So I'm catching up to talk about things today. This is a special one because this hits more than just ADHD and just women. This hits a culture of awareness. And I think it's so important to talk about this. You know, at the Institute, we like to focus on what's important, but we also like to focus on everything around it that supports why it's important to focus on the one thing, right? We got to understand everything around it. Um, so I'm really happy to talk to you all about this. For those of you that don't, we've had talks about ADHD in the past, right? But I'll do a quick review of that. I'll talk about the disorder in women and girls, and then I'll also look at some ways to kind of help process that and heal from that as well. At least starting points that we can start talking about different things. So, um, those of you who do not know, ADHD is called Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. Um, it is considered a neurological behavioral um, disorder. So it's a neurobehavioral disorder, and it's defined by persistent patterns of inattention, hyperactivity, or impulsivity. Um, in childhood, we tend to find that being an attentive or hyperactive child is normal. However, there's a certain persistent type of pattern that creates it to become a disorder. And we find out that through the use of medication, through the use of cognitive behavioral resettings, and just different types of conditioning, patterning that can actually change. So uh, what I love about the focus today is we're talking about the misdiagnosis of things. So let's just talk about that first of all. Misdiagnosing is something that happens more than we want to accept and acknowledge sometimes because no one wants to be wrong when it comes to diagnosing someone's health, right? We want people to get better. We diagnose so people can get better. So misdiagnosing is a common thing. And unfortunately, the reasons might be for different types of reasons. Um, However, for this one in specific, it happens a lot more. ADHD happens a lot more. Is misdiagnosed often more with women for multiple reasons, right? Um, so just off the bat, there are many clinical trials and research showing that women are diagnosed incorrectly, and it happens. Um, and so what they found is that girls are more internalizing than externalizing, which means that they're more inattentive than hyperactive. So that means that boys are typically more hyperactive or outwardly expressive, which kind of goes more along the lines of the stereotypical ADHD. The inattentive type is more seen in girls. And so there's a lot more internalization occurring, which might create as like a, oh, they're not focusing or they're not caring. There's a lot of obsessive compulsiveness with that as well. Remember, yesterday we talked about obsessive compulsive disorder, that perfectionist behavior um, that happens often as well. Um, these type of behaviors or conditioning that's occurring on these children causes us to kind of overlook ADHD. Um, it's becoming very common now, and unfortunately, because it's becoming common, people are also willing to overlook it and also over prescribe the diagnosis as well. Um, I think that it has a lot to do with environmental conditioning as well. Being in environments, especially schools, that have very gender roles, stereotypical gender roles, a lot of times they, the people that describe their behaviors, it's sometimes coming from a very limited viewpoint. So, um, sometimes when untreated ADHD occurs in women, obsessive compulsive disorder may occur, right? Um, there's a disparity between the sexes, and I think that as a clinician, it's important to understand the individual's behavior, but also their environment, also their conditioning, and their social structure as well, right? A lot of times, um, women will get diagnosed with anxiety or depression. Girls will before they ever get considered for ADHD. Um, so, and the consequences, especially being in a school for children, like it's different the way that they're treated. Um, so the comorbidities, like anxiety, depression, um, can sometimes overshadow the ADHD that's actually happening. And so, um, I believe there's a lot of clinical suspicion upon that. So what I mean for that is, I think that girls are not taking it seriously when it comes to ADHD treatment. They're focused more on their feelings like anxiety or depression. They're not actually looking at the neurobehavioral aspect of their lives. Um, and I think that's something that we as clinicians have to understand their own biasness in that moment as well. Um, so, just a quick overview of things. Um, so, like I said before, women and girls with ADHD, they usually have more internalizing symptoms. So the inattentiveness, um, than the impulsive hyperactivity. So they're formals. I call them formals, like teachers, family, friends. They are more likely to look at that diagnosis. And so that's something that really does happen. However, if a boy is hyperactive or extremely impulsive, they'll go straight to it, right? They won't talk about depression or anxiety. They might miss that out. So it's so important to really let the client speak for themselves, or in a space that allows them to express what they're feeling. Um, I have found, though, in research that females are with ADHD typically develop better coping skills, and they can actually mask um, their ADHD symptoms as well. Um, Unfortunately, I believe because of other coexisting conditions, anxiety and depression are often overshadowed with girls or women. And so ADHD really is overlooked to a point where we don't really focus on the neurobehavioral conditions, which means that the developmental aspect will also alter as a result as they keep reinforcing that behavior not being addressed. Um, And so I really hope that today, there is a level of, you know, awareness on this, because you think about all the people that are being misdiagnosed because of how they act, how they are culturally different, and how they are perceived based upon who they represent. And a lot of times we misdiagnose just because of the time in which we think we have to express ourselves. And sometimes the people have not been in the place to actually express what they are feeling. And so there is unfortunately, a social barrier into diagnosing. And so I hope that, in moving forward, I guess some of my takeaways for you all is, first of all, write down and understand the behaviors that you find are most distressful to you. So write those out. Then you write about, what is stopping you on a daily basis or disrupting you on a daily basis. Those are the things that I would point out and look at before I would even make a diagnosis. I would look at the consistency and the level of distress that behavior is causing you. And from there, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be one diagnosis. It could be 20 diagnoses. It doesn't matter. Remember, mental health is on the spectrum. So you can have 5 things, but only have one presenting on a Tuesday, right? So it's just depending on what's going on. And I think allowing women to struggle in silence because they're not able to discuss their behavioral disruptions, it makes it more challenging for the process of healing. So, if you didn't learn anything today, write out how you feel. Understand that there are people next to you that don't get to be seen the way they need to be seen. And it's our job to understand what they're experiencing rather than how they're treating other things. It's important to understand the human experience from the person that is experiencing it. You don't have to be them to understand them. And empathy is understanding that their world has been adjusted because of how they've been treated. So, I hope that today was helpful. I hope today was supportive. Please go on our YouTube, follow us, subscribe. It really helps out with how we're going to talk next. If you have any conversations that you want to talk about, please let me know. I'll be happy to talk about that. And remember that with self-awareness comes emotional responsibility. And as always, be kind to yourself. And remember, on the 28th, we'll be talking about bully prevention. That's going to be a really good one.